Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And we are rejoined by my good friend and returning champion Alfred De Zayas. Alfred De Zayas, who is a professor of international law and other superb subjects, based in Geneva, Switzerland. He's a Cuban American Swiss. Swiss man, anti-imperialist thinker, a good friend to indigenous people. He's an advocate of a global Native Lives Matter solidarity campaign, and as well as a defender of the Catalans' right to at least a referendum, and a good friend to the anti-imperialist movement. And this edition of One Plus One, this is a breaking news edition of One Plus One. Normally we don't do this, but unfortunately there was tragic breaking news, which is Julian Assange, the United States, won their extradition appeal against Julian Assange, and who better to talk about this terrible travesty of justice, this systematic injustice being inflicted on a superb prisoner of conscience, and which is Julian
Political
Assange.
prisoner, that's what it is. So if you let me go, here is the book of my friend and colleague, Professor Niels Meltzer,
Yes.
the head of the Graduate Institute Human Rights Program, and he is the rapporteur on torture. And he's visited on repeated occasions Julian Assange at Belmarsh prison. He has submitted his report to the United Kingdom, and it's been ignored. It's not the first time that the United Kingdom ignores the United Nations. As a matter of fact, when the working group of the United Nations on arbitrary detention in December 2015 came out and said the situation forced upon Assange is tantamount to arbitrary detention and should be immediately released, etc. The then foreign minister called that a ridiculous ruling. When I, on two occasions, put out a press release in my function as independent expert calling for the immediate release of Assange, I didn't even get a response. I mean, I was totally ignored. Not important enough. As the case may be, this book can be a game changer. It's coming out in English in February in Verso Verlag in New York. It came out with Pipa in Munich because, of course, Niels Meltzer, he is a Swiss German from Zurich, and his mother tongue is German. So the original is German. It is what he there reveals is the breakdown of the rule of law in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in Sweden, and in Ecuador. I mean, the revelations are so much worse, so much more preoccupying than this famous Dreyfus affair of 1898, when Émile Zola came out with his article, J'accuse. But Émile Zola was complaining about the malfunctioning of the military courts in France. They had framed up this Jewish fellow and claimed that he was a spy, which he wasn't, etc., etc. Thank God. The press back in 1898 reacted, supported Émile Zola and supported Dreyfus, and he was released. The problem today is that we have a corporate media. We don't have a free press in the West.
Exactly.
Everybody keeps saying we have a free press. You are a free press, and I'm sure you also bear the brunt of it, same as I. By the way, I've Not only have I collected death threats and insults and mobbing during my career, in particular during my United Nations career, now
Or the
I've been,
worst, or the worst, which is being ignored.
I published an article on Julian Assange. I published an article on the so-called Summit for Democracy. I just published an article on the Tamils. I just published an article on the so-called Uighur tribunal, which is just a piece of propaganda. I mean, in any event, I've been called a traitor. I've been called unpatriotic. All I can say for all listeners, for Christ's sake, the little slogan that I heard so often as a young man, my country right or wrong, is a cop-out. I mean, I'm not copping out. I want my country proactively good, right. And if my country is wrong, I want to fix it. And that's why we call for accountability. If we are a democratic society, we must call our leaders to account. If our leaders commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, as revealed by Julian Assange, then it is for us, the electors, to protest, to go out on the streets, to demonstrate. Of course, they tell us, oh, well, the democratic system is such that the representative doesn't represent you right, you vote him out of office, except that there's no choice. The other one is going to be exactly the same. I mean, don't believe that the two-party system functions. The two-party system is only twice as democratic as the one-party system. That is, we only have one party in the United States, and that party is called the military, industrial, financial complex. They rule the country. So no one gets even close to being candidate of the for the presidency, or even for a post of senator, a post of congressman or congresswoman, unless he goes along with American exceptionalism, American interventionism, with Wall Street, and of course with Israel, because any candidate who supports the rights of the Palestinians, he's out. So why don't you stop now and make sure that it actually has recorded?
Well, do. Wait, wait, 1 second. It's starting. Okay, we're back on the 1+1 with my good friend Alfred De Zayas, talking about the terrible U.S. victory. The U.S. won its appeal against Julian Assange to extradite him in the U.S. for the crime of truth-telling and myth-busting journalism. But the U.S. claims that it's under the Espionage Act. The U.S. is stepping up its war on whistleblowing. And actually, Mr. Zayas, can you push back against two propaganda? That's propaganda that's always lavished on Julian Assange. Can you push back against the propaganda that he only targets the West, so therefore he's a Russian agent? And can you push back against the propaganda that he was guilty of sex crimes, and how and he could have had a fair trial in Sweden? Can you push back against those two things?
Yeah. Well, I met Julian Assange back in 2010 when he spoke at the United Nations. He came to the Human Rights Council, and he was at a very substantial side event. The room was full, was packed. And at that time, he was, shall we say, the darling of the human rights establishment. He had received God knows how many awards and recognition
already by then,
because he had through WikiLeaks, revealed the corruption and the bribery in so many African and Asian countries. So the West was happy as long as the targets were somewhere in the third world. The moment that Assange dared to show that the United States is an emperor without clothes, you know, the Hans Christian Andersen fable. There's a little boy that says, but the emperor is naked. Well, Assange has shown that the United States has a massive propaganda machinery, massive public relations machinery that sells the United States as the leader of human rights when it systematically violates human rights, undermines the very philosophy of human rights. Because this weaponization of human rights that the United States uses against Russia and China and Cuba and Venezuela, I mean, this has only one purpose: imperialism. Has only one purpose: imposing the American model on every other country in the world, disregarding the right of self-determination of peoples, and of course, making sure that the rich remain rich and the poor stay poor. I mean, it's the system that allows these billionaires, and we have so many billionaires in the United States, and right now, during COVID, the billionaires actually have significantly increased their wealth. Everybody else has lost money, but not the billionaires. So the United States is interested in maintaining this exploitation. You might call it neo-colonial exploitation. And in order to sell the product, they have a corporate media that suppresses information and that actually disseminates fake news. I've been, as I told you, I've been accused of being unpatriotic and of being a traitor myself because I defend Julian Assange and because I condemn American crimes in Afghanistan and in Iraq, etc., etc. And I say, wait a minute, you know, what I want is that my representatives actually live by the ethics that they claim that they are representing. I mean, we are supposed to practice what we preach. Today, as you know, is the third Sunday of Advent. And I like to read the Gospel of Luke and the wonderful Magnificat, and also the wonderful Song of Zechariah. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about Matthew 7. Matthew 7 is why do I see the speck in the other guy's eye and I don't see my own disability in my own vision? Why is it that instead of sweeping at my doorstep, I want to criticize the other? So there is a very high level of entrenched hypocrisy in the United States. And the amazing thing is that many of my friends in the United States who are intelligent individuals, they're lawyers, I mean, they are historians, they are economists, etc. They're so indoctrinated by this daily dose of propaganda coming from the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, BBC, etc., that they're not aware that they are being manipulated. I mean, my benefit, or rather my luck, was that I left the United States, joined the United Nations. I've been living in Switzerland for decades, and I do read the Swiss press. I read the Russian press. I read the Chinese press, I read the Venezuelan press, and I realize, oh my God, the world is totally different than that what the average American on the street in New York or Washington thinks. So, having said that, the case of Assange is scandalous, but I mean, it's not ended. What happens is that they really hope that he will finally die in prison because this ridiculous decision is being appealed. And
so they still have the
now,
rights. So,
of course, it went back to the magistrate court, and of course, there it will be appealed on the actual issues. The decision that we just saw on the 10th of December, what an insult, Human Rights Day, that they picked Human Rights Day to release such an anti-human rights ruling. But again, that is only with regard to his health, because the magistrate court, court of first instance at the time, had said, "Oh, let's not discuss, all the real issues, the fact that he's a journalist, the fact that there's a principle of non-refoulement, the fact that obviously he has not committed any crime, or if there's any crime in question, it's a political crime." And a political crime, of course, is covered by the Geneva Convention. And you cannot extradite or expel an individual to any country where he will be facing persecution. Not just prosecution for a fake crime. If he faces persecution, ill treatment, discrimination, and so on and so forth. So he's the classical case for whom the Geneva Convention of 1951 and its 1967 protocol were drafted. So the thing will then have to be re-argued, but in the meantime, he's still in prison. Although obviously it would be very easy if they don't think that they will finish the arguments expeditiously. They can give him a little ring that he wears around his arm or around his leg, and then you always know where he is. So, as a matter of fact, even the great criminal Augusto Pinochet, when he was in London, he was assigned to residence, so he was very comfortable. I mean, he was not in a prison. He was
he was doing the bidding of the imperialists and of the fascists of his country.
And he had a personal visit by Margaret Thatcher. It's that bad. It really is that bad when you think of it. So it will be now rediscussed, and if the court were to make another ridiculous ruling, it will go to the European Court of Human Rights. And there's no way that the European Court of Human Rights would allow. By the way, it's applicable. Brexit did not exclude. I mean, Brexit only means you're out of the European Union, but you're not out of the Council of Europe. Council of Europe is 47 states. Council of Europe is all of Europe. Like Turkey. Turkey isn't the Council of Europe. Shouldn't be, but it is. But of course, Turkey is not in the EU. So, having said that about Assange, I want to come back to something else. I want to mention the scandalous situation, and actually dangerous situation of this surge in xenophobia, this surge in anti-Chinese propaganda. You remember the People's Tribunals, the Tribunal of Bertrand Russell on Vietnam, that was back in 1967. The Tribunal on Armenia, on the Armenian Genocide, 2004 in Paris. You remember the tribunal on Iraq. That was the Kuala Lumpur Tribunal. These were all tribunals set up as a spontaneous protest by civil society against the cover-up by government and against the cover-up by the media, because the media was not talking about American crimes in Iraq. The media was not talking about the genocide of the Tamils, for instance. There was a People's Tribunal back in 2013, and if I remember correctly, it was
and WikiLeaks has long vindicated investigative journalists who have said that that systemic war crimes did take place not just in Iraq but also Afghanistan, as well as the U.S. spying on various United Nations agencies and whatnot.
But you have to distinguish genuine people's tribunals, which are necessary because of the crime of silence, because the media is not doing its job of a watchdog. Matter of fact, the media has become the echo chamber of government. That's the reason why you have people's tribunals. But now they established a Uighur tribunal that feeds directly into this enormous propaganda campaign of the media against China. You want to knock out this economic rival. So you want to accuse them of genocide. Well, interestingly enough, notwithstanding the ridiculous headlines in the newspapers on Friday, last Thursday, the 9th of December, the Uighur, so-called Uighur tribunal in London decided that China had committed genocide against the Uyghurs. If you read the summary of the judgment, you will realize that they discarded all of those elements of genocide that you would associate with genocide. No, like the Armenian genocide, you're just beating people to death, putting them in the desert so that they die of starvation and of thirst, or the Holocaust in the gas chambers, etc., etc. That is what what genocide is all about.
As well as cultural genocide, like residential schools.
All of that was just simply more or less discarded because they couldn't prove intent. There was no evidence for it. But they hung on Article 2, little d. Article 2, little d of the Genocide Convention says that if there are measures to prevent births, that is also an element of genocide. Except that China has 1.4 billion human beings. China has a countrywide policy of birth control, has a countrywide policy that does not target the Uighurs or the Muslims or anybody else. It applies to everybody. It has a policy to discourage big families. I mean, they want.
But the Uyghurs were exempt from that.
Average Chinese family is 1 or 2 children. That is it. And the average Muslim family in Xinjiang is 7, 8 kids. So there is an effort on the part of China to dampen that. As a matter of fact, the Uyghur population in China is growing much faster than the remainder of the Chinese population. So this in itself defeats the so-called judgment, the so-called ruling of this tribunal, because if you go into the travaux préparatoires of the convention, if you go into the drafting history of the convention, you realize that this particular act of reducing for health reasons, for national reasons, reducing the massive growth of population, obviously was never contemplated as anything that could be genocide. But again, the journalists don't care. All they need is a statement at the end of the ruling of this so-called tribunal that there was genocide, and then that is magnified. So we're living, as another great book that I mentioned, Gouverné par les fake news, published 2020 in France. Jacques Beau, I know him, friend of mine. He is a former senior military Swiss, an expert in demining, an expert on chemical weapons, and he worked for the United Nations for about 20 years. Again, someone very solid. So he shows how the United States and the United Kingdom, etc., actually govern through fake news. And that brings me to my own book, in which I write about Assange and I write about whistleblowers, and I called
Building a Just World Order. This is your latest book, right?
Here again, my new book came out 1st September 2021, so it's only been 3 months in the market. Building a Just World Order, and I formulate in this book 25 principles of international order. Among those principles, of course, the paramount principle is peace. Peace, peacemaking, the prohibition of propaganda for war, and the right of self-determination, that is principle 10. The prohibition of interference in the internal affairs of states, principle 19. The enforcement of international judgments, because we'll remember the Nicaragua judgment of the International Court of Justice, 1986, was never enforced. I mean, the United States was solidly condemned for its undermining democracy in Nicaragua, trying to impose regime change through supporting an insurgent group, financing the Contras, etc. And of course, nothing ever happened to it. So I would say international order, what is the key to the credibility of the entire system? The credibility is, of course, enforcement, and we don't have it. And so I hope at least that this book will have some kind of an impact. Of course, the mainstream media, I don't expect a full-page review in the New York Times anytime soon. But for instance, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who used to be the president of the General Assembly back in 2018, 2019, she wrote about it. The 25 Zayas principles of international order are a Magna Carta for the 21st century. Or you have the former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Bertie Ramcharan, writing, Alfred De Zayas is a great human rights lawyer who, alongside with Jacob Muller, so used to be my boss, Jacob Muller, pioneered the development of United Nations human rights jurisprudence. He was a dynamic special rapporteur, as is evidenced by his principles for a democratic and equitable international order. Now, we have offers for translating the book into German and into Italian. I'd be very keen on seeing the book translated into French. I would not be surprised if the Russians and the Chinese translate it on their own. I probably will never see a penny, I'll never see a cent. Probably just do it on their own, but they will use it because the principles are valid. The principles are actually a development from the resolution 2625 of the General Assembly, the Friendly Relations Resolution, but that resolution goes back 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've brought everything up to date, taking into account subsequent resolutions, 3314, 60/1, the outcome document of the World Summit, talk about the summit of Mr. Biden. I mean, this farce, I mean, this extravaganza, it's ridiculous. I mean, we already had a World Summit which was fully inclusive Everybody participated. People were not excluded. Everybody participated. And the bottom line of the World Summit 2005 was that there are many models of democracy, and every country has the right to find its own way. There's no possibility of importing or exporting democracy. The United Nations can help through advisory services, technical assistance. Countries who request that help, they can get assistance in improving their constitution, their legislation, their regulations, etc. The United Nations will do that for you. But it cannot be imposed by force. The moment that it is not homegrown, it's not genuine. It's not democracy. It's not self-determination. People should finally understand that democracy is self-determination, as self-determination is a manifestation of democracy. But people just throw the word around, democracy,
Yeah,
democracy,
exactly.
and say
But
we are.
Mr. Zayas, before we run out of time, I want to ask you three quick
One last
questions.
question because I have to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. So three quick questions. Number one, what can people power movements do to free Julian Assange and make sure that that a happy ending is him released from Belmarsh prison, or heaven forbid in the U.S. prison? And what do you think? What, in your opinion, was the revelation which shocks you the most that WikiLeaks revealed? And yeah, those are my two final questions. And I just want to say to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks, thank you for exposing what the Clinton campaign and the DNC and their allies in the media did to Bernie Sanders. For me, that was a tour de force, and they stood by journalism ethics, revealing how Bernie Sanders was usurped from the Democratic nomination.
Secrecy, in particular government secrecy, is the conditio sine qua non for genocide. When you have a system that covers up its own crimes, it always wants to go beyond them. I mean, it's amazing how people, when you are in a criminal organization, and I consider the NATO to be a criminal organization, you get away with an illegal war against Serbia in 1999, not at all covered by the United Nations, the Security Council, contrary to Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. When you get away with that, you do that with impunity. And you even, when Serbia brings the case to the International Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice says it has no jurisdiction. I mean, when you see that the whole system is corrupted, I mean, who will guard the guardians? I mean, you would think that the International Court of Justice is the ultimate guardian. It copped out. So the NATO feels encouraged. It does the massive assault on international law, which was the attack on Iraq in 2003. Gets away with it. Gets involved in the regime change in Libya, 2011. And since 2011, gets involved in the regime change strategy against Assad in Syria. So that's why a whistleblower is so important, to show us that our government, whom we would like to trust, is lying to us systematically. I mean, it is a system that allows aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, even genocide. And that's why people like Julian Assange should have the Nobel Prize for Peace, because by showing us the atrocities that followed the American aggression against Iraq and Afghanistan, he is showing us that the only way forward for humanity is peace. Peace, negotiation, and dialogue with whomever happens to be your rival. So, what can you do to help Assange? Well, I'm a practicing Catholic. I've written the Pope, and I'm very close to one advisor of the Pope. And I've written this cardinal on repeated occasions. He was a good friend of mine when he was nuncio here in Geneva. You can write your representatives, your congressmen, your senators. You can write, of course, to the press, but the press will ignore you. That's the thing. Because for instance, every article that I published recently in Counterpunch, in Truth Out, in CGTN, in RT, you'll laugh, but just for the fun of it. I always sent the article first to the New York Times, then I get an acknowledgement that they received it, and 3 days later I get an email that says we won't publish it. I collect them. I must have, I don't know, dozens of rejections from the New York Times. So it's not like I don't want to give an interview to the BBC or to the Free Press or to the Washington Post. If the Washington Post asks me for an op-ed or the Washington Post interviews me, I will say exactly the same thing that I said in my interview with Counterpunch or with Truth Out or with CGTN. So everyone should write to their democratic representatives, but also demonstrate, go out on the streets. I mean, this is a frontal attack on democracy. This is a frontal attack on journalism. This is a frontal attack on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I mean, you have to disseminate that through the social media. You have to flood Twitter and Facebook with information about these abuses committed by the United States, United Kingdom, Sweden, and Ecuador in the case of Julian Assange. And go on the internet, read up on the Dreyfus affair of 1898, and you will realize, as I did, that the revelations of Julian Assange and the revelations of Professor Niels Meltzer concerning the case of Julian Assange are so much more serious. I mean, we are in Oceania already. If you read 1984, you know what Oceania means, meaning us, our world, and we have allowed it. And the sad thing is that many, maybe not your listeners, but many out there who do not listen to Youri Smouter or to Rico and others, the great masses are actually happy. They love Big Brother. They're perfectly happy with Big Brother. That is the great success
of propaganda.
Propaganda and of the corporate media. And on this note, I wish you a lovely third Advent. And I have to move to the kitchen because I have guests coming. So,
and I just want to say, speaking of Dreyfus, people should check out Roman Polanski's movie J'accuse, or The Officer and the Spy.
right.
Fantastic film.
Thank you.
So, Mr. De Zayas, thank you so much for joining me today. And I would like to wish you and your wife a very Merry Christmas, and hope to speak to you sometime next year, hopefully with better news and People Power Movements. Keep up the work and free Julian Assange. I'm with Wikileaks,
yes.
and to quote Donald Trump, I love WikiLeaks. So
me too. Thank you. Take care,
everybody.
Ciao. Ciao.